Hey class, it's Mr. Andrews. So good to see you, I guess, again. I've got a couple things for you today. The first one is I want to give you an update on the rest of the calendar. I've had a couple of you reach out to me with questions about what does the due date look like for this final essay. As you may know, AP pushed back the due date for these to be submitted to AP to May 26th, but also, as you know, the school has elected to end by May 21st. So obviously, this being a part of your semester grade as well as your AP grade, it is important that I get these in before that 26th deadline. And of course, they'll be submitted to the AP by the 26th. So I wanted to go over a couple quick things regarding that, regarding what you need to do to sign up for some conferences that we have coming up. So let's take a look here. First off, if you go to our homepage on Canvas, you can actually find this calendar linked. I've also linked it in today's class as well, but you'll see it right at the top, just under the syllabus. I've, in all caps, put updated course calendar right here. This is where the course calendar was originally. I've reduced it now to just what we have left. In addition, I've updated the dates to reflect our Tuesday, Thursday schedule and what we have going on. So in these last couple of weeks, basically what we're focusing on here is revising that last section of the paper, if you haven't yet, revising your conclusions and your future directions. And then I'm also going to give you some conference info as well. So today, as we've done with the previous sections, I'm going to be showing you a sample essay and that final section, giving you some live annotation and some tips and some takeaways from it for you. The other thing we're going to do is the next 3 classes, we're going to have individual conferences. Now, while I can't provide direct feedback on your writing, one thing we can do is talk about your writing in general. And one of the things I can do is at least ask questions and attempt to kind of lead your thoughts towards where you need to go. I cannot, however, fix problems for you. I can tell you about the assignment, but I can't tell you specifically how to improve your specific writing, if that makes sense. But I still want to be able to have a discussion about where you're at. I still want to be able to ask you some questions and hopefully help you in terms of guiding your thoughts and orienting you towards the solution that you need. And so that's what we're going to do. The other thing we can do during these conferences, they're about 15 minutes long each, is we can talk a little bit about your POD if you have questions about that still, or if you'd like just a little more elaboration or feedback on that as well. So those are 2 things that we really can do at that time. 15 minutes long, those conferences. I have 3 separate days. To sign up for them, it is first come, first serve. Now, you're probably wondering, how do we do that? Well, today at 7 p.m., the sign-up sheet is going to go live. Now, how is that going to go live? Well, first off, when you go to announcements, starting at 7 p.m., you will be seeing this announcement posted. So this is exactly what it's going to look like. It'll say you can now sign up for conferences on these dates. So it's this Thursday, next Tuesday, and Thursday as well. This document is first come, first serve. You can add your name here. So you'll be able to click on the link. It'll come to your inbox at 7 p.m. If you haven't yet, make sure to set your Canvas settings so that it pops into your email. If you have that set up, then it's going to pop right into your email at 7 p.m. You can begin and click on the link. So this is what the sign-up sheet looks like. As you can see here, 15-minute time slots ranging from 10 a.m. until 3:30 p.m. I know that you guys have busy lives and you probably have other classes that are scheduled and maybe even asking you to Zoom. So I'm going to let you guys kind of figure out where fits in best there. If these time slots do not make sense for you, if there's no way that you can fit in on these other days, on any of these time slots, right? Let me know and I can be flexible with you. But I want you to know that I'm only going to be flexible on the basis of none of these time slots work for me. I'm not going to be flexible on this in the sense that 5:14 and 11:15 is the only one available and I just want to meet before then, right? That's not a reason. If the reason is I literally cannot meet because I've got other class stuff on all those times and dates, that's a legit excuse, okay? So I'm not going to be meeting with you just because you have a preference. I'm going to be meeting with you at a time outside of this if there's absolutely no other way, okay? So I just want you to know that's the threshold. Otherwise, I'm going to ask that you sign up for these time slots here. So I do have other classes, okay? The other thing to know is that this is the information right here for getting to the meeting. This is the permalink to my Zoom meeting. This is the password right here, 2020. So make sure that you're going to that through Zoom for our individual conference at that time. Now, it is going to be worth some participation points, so I want to make it worth your time as well with that. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, but that is the updated calendar. The final research essay is due midnight on the 15th. So that is midnight of next Friday. We've got just a little less than 2 weeks now to finish these suckers out. Friday is the absolute latest I could push it to, guys. I wanted to push it as late as I could for you, but it's going to take a Herculean effort on my part just to get these graded within like those 6 days that I'll have following it, because as you know, it's a lot of material. So I pushed these back as far as I possibly could in order to really give them the time and attention they deserve and need to be graded adequately. And just as a note here, the research essays will be submitted to AP on the 26th. Instruction on whether or not you need to take part in that or do anything with that, I'll be making sure to clarify that for you in the coming days. To be quite frank with you, this is my first time teaching the class, and so I need to figure out whether or not there's more you need to do or if I'm one submitting all of those. So I will get that information to you guys and clarify that as soon as possible. So that is it for the updates today. But let's talk about that last section of the paper. At this point, you've done a peer review. Hopefully you got some feedback on this section and that as well. But I wanted to show you a sample essay and how one sample essay, this one that specifically looks at NFL rosters, attempts to organize and communicate the goals of this last section of the paper. So this is a live reading. I want you to know I actually haven't read through this before, and as in all the cases, mostly what I'm trying to do here is to examine them and to pull out some of the takeaways that I think will be important for you. Some of the features I see in here that really match up with what AP says is an effective conclusion section. So let's start. Right as they are concluding their findings and analysis, right, they get into limitations and future directions. Now, you may be scratching your head and saying, well, in some cases it was called the conclusions and future directions, right? So that would suggest that like future directions would come last, right? Not necessarily. It's really up to you, right, how you choose to order some of these elements and components. Some of you, for instance, may have decided to include limitations and discuss those limitations in the actual analysis of your findings. And that's quite fine, right? This particular person decided to lump limitations into their future directions. So whether the limitations are considered in the analysis of your findings or in the discussion, or whether they're considered in this final section is totally up to you. It's just a question of, are you including those limitations, right? Where you do is up to you, and where you feel it is best set in terms of the discussion. Now, some would probably say it would be best to do alongside the findings. In this particular case, they decided to push that off and really focus on it after the discussion, right? So that's what they're doing here. So let's take a look. This study was limited by the inavailability to more advanced analytics that would have presented a better picture to a player's on-field performance. And again, they're analyzing NFL rosters specifically in performance. The collection of one's AV provides, and I'm going to assume that AV is a value of some sort that they've looked at, provides a general view of their production, but it does not give specific information tailored to certain positions or overall rankings compared to everyone in the league that season. The availability to have collected performance metrics from Pro Football Focus and Next Gen Stats would have been ideal, but due to the high cost, I was unable to access these records, though. For future studies pertaining to this field, these sources should be utilized. So they're noting a limitation in terms of just available resources, in terms of incomplete information. Makes sense. Furthermore, in order to be consistent when constructing the depth chart for each team, the date of October 1st of that given year was used, which is after the third game of the regular season. Due to the fluidity of NFL rosters, each team signs and releases players constantly throughout the offseason, all the way up through the first 3 weeks of the regular season. That being said, players that were undergoing a suspension before or placed on injured reserve or traded to the team after October 1st may have not been included in the study for that particular year, which would not have given the full picture of the talent on that team. In order to mitigate this problem, tracking all players a part of the team that season could be done through the number of players, though the number of players would then be over 53, which would prolong the data study. However, the total data collection was sufficient and provided insight into successful roster building strategy. So while this does sound like they are only noting limitations, one thing that really points to why they may have chosen to lump their limitations with future directions involves this sentence right here, right? Because of the limitations that they noted in terms of available information that they were able to access, one of the implications of that limitation, right, is that there is future research that needs to be done, right? So for future studies pertaining to this field, these sources should be utilized. So one of the things that you may note is that this may be the choice for you if the limitations that you observed in both your process or in your results, if those connect to recommendations you might make for future research, right, then it might make sense to connect those two. If you had incomplete information or there was something that came out in the results that you think needs further examination, right, this is an opportunity for you to maybe make connections between the limitations and those future directions. It's often the case that researchers will recommend future directions as a result of the limitations in their own research, right? So this is one smart move you can make, and maybe it didn't occur to you that there is a connection or could be a connection between these two elements. But let's say that your limitations are in your analysis already in that section right before this. And let's say that they're just kind of mentioned to be there to show that you thought it through, right? But now you're beginning to think, hey, actually, as it turns out, those limitations do probably offer up some possible recommendations I could make for other research, right? Maybe this is an opportunity for you to revise that, to take those limitations out of the discussion up here and to put them now into conversation with the research that could be done in the future, right? So again, look to your limitations wherever you consider them and ask, okay, do those limitations imply or suggest possible research that could be done in the future? So now you have the option then of either taking those limitations and putting them into their own section here, or in this future directions and conclusions, maybe referencing back to them. If you want to keep them in the analysis, that's fine. But referencing back to some of those limitations might be a good thing, especially if you want to draw out some of the possible directions that could be taken based on. Okay. So that's one big takeaway here is use the limitations as a basis potentially for recommending future research, right? Now let's look at the conclusion. So conclusion proper here, what are we going to do? What are we going to see here? The goal of this academic paper was to compare the roster management strategies of the three teams that each exhibited the highest and lowest winning percentages since the most current CBA in 2011, and to identify the current patterns that could be applied to improve the focus team, the Arizona Cardinals, in the following season. So I'm getting the sense that, the rest of this essay was really focused on kind of almost like a case study, right? Focusing on the specific team, the Arizona Cardinals, as it was attempting to do that. Now, the goals of the paper at this point should be clear, right? Why bring up the goals at the end? Well, a lot has happened, right? And this is a long, involved paper, and it can be really helpful, honestly, especially since your reader's likely to only read through this once, to provide some sort of reminder to them. So while it might feel redundant to you as a writer, as a person who's been thinking about this all year, to write again or remind us again about what your goals were, right? It might be a helpful thing to really come back to in the conclusion. So make sure that your conclusion does revisit the goals of your project, right? That it comes back full circle and it revisits the goals. This is helpful on two fronts. One is it helps to remind the reader and refocus all of this information they just took in, right? And to refocus it back to the primary purpose of your paper. The second thing that it does too is, as a writer, for you, it helps you to refocus your thoughts as well. And it really will challenge you and hopefully direct your thoughts back towards, okay, how do all these implications and limitations add up to some sort of answer or partial answer or incomplete answer to this initial question that I asked, right? So that's what you really want to begin by coming back to, is what was the primary purpose? Restate it. Doesn't have to be restated the exact same way, but it should be restated accurately to what was stated in the intro. So this posed the question, to what extent can analytics be used to increase the team performance of the Arizona Cardinals in the 2019-2020 NFL season? The collected data led to the confirmation of spending thresholds at certain positions on both sides of the football. So first and foremost, they mentioned one of the important implications or takeaways of the data. What did the data help to answer, right? For instance, the difference in spending at quarterback and FS. I don't know what FS would stand for. You football people are probably going crazy right now because you're like, I know what it is. Anyway, I'm going to assume they explained that earlier in the paper. Between the higher and lower tier teams can be used to explain the inequality in their winning percentages, even though their spending at running back and across the offensive and defensive line was similar. Important to keep in mind, as it was not a part of the study, is the coaching efficiency of the teams. According to M.A. Roach, a professor at the Department of Economics and Finance at Middle Tennessee State, a team should not expect to have a winning record and have a positive point differential until after the coach's fourth season. So what they're kind of going through is they're revisiting all of the important takeaways from the data, right? Some of the implications of examining higher and lower tier teams, winning percentages, the amount of money they spend on these different positions, right? But they're also noting some of the other variables that they came across in their research too, right? Some of the important limitations to their data. And while this wasn't a limitation that was mentioned just before, it is a limitation nonetheless, that they're noting that despite all of the, these spending thresholds and roster building, it's important to note that this isn't everything, that their research and even some of their content analysis revealed that coaching matters too, right? So the study connects with other research as in a rebuilding period in the NFL, as when former rookies begin to enter their peak performance during year four. That is also the same year where the head coach starts to see consistent winning results on the field, perhaps suggesting a 4-year period for a general manager to construct a winning team. So one of the things that they're doing here is they're synthesizing the information, right? By connecting this information that they noted in terms of the variables that contribute to a winning team, they're comparing and even connecting that idea to other research which suggests the same thing, this idea that new players, rookie players, take 4 years to really establish themselves. And so one thing that you really want to think about doing in the conclusion is, although you may have done some of this in your analysis and discussion already, you want to think about taking some of those highlights, those important takeaways from the discussion, and synthesizing those highlights together as well, playing them off each other and putting them back into conversation with each other. I noted this on your PODs that many of you really struggled to bring all of your analysis and discussion back into conversation with existing research. But that's exactly what they're doing here as well, not just in their analysis section. They're doing that now in their conclusion as well, even as they revisit some of the takeaways from their own research. They're putting that into conversation with the other variables they noted in content analysis as well in the background research, right? So the Arizona Cardinals took their first steps in their rebuilding process during the 2018 offseason by hiring Steve Keim at general manager, Steve Wilks at head coach, and drafting Josh Rosenberg at quarterback with the 10th overall pick. My assumption is they've probably gone through some of this information already, right? But one of the things that they're now doing is they're sort of summarizing up some important information from their case study, and they're taking that information and reviewing it now in light of this larger understanding. in light of understanding how all these different variables contribute to a winning roster, right? So one thing you might do is consider in your conclusion sort of summarizing, right, some of the important information that you reviewed earlier in much greater detail. So it's not just a question of your conclusion revisiting your purpose and your question. It's also a question of your conclusion revisiting now what needs to be summarized. Maybe it was your process of surveying somebody or your experiment, right? So summarizing that experiment again. In this case, it is a case study that they focused on, which was the Arizona Cardinals. So they're going to review and summarize that case study, not in the great detail they did before, but they're sort of giving us those highlights, right? Those big takeaways from it. So though, based on the results from the study, selecting another quarterback with their first pick in consecutive drafts would not be recommended. So again, they're reviewing the case study, but with some of those conclusions in mind, with some of that analysis in mind, right? Rather using the pick to select DT Quinnen Williams, as he's regarded as one of the 2 blue chip prospects in the draft, and because of the value the position provides. Moreover, research has exhibited time and time again that picks at the top of the draft, especially the first overall pick, have a market value that is significantly higher than their return performance. In an empirical study by Cade Massey and Richard Thaler, notice that they're mentioning information from sources specifically, even in their conclusion, right? This is what it means to put the information in conversation. Maybe this is a point that wasn't relevant up to this point, right? But maybe after all the analysis and after the research, you have an idea or a piece of evidence from a source that now is more relevant than ever, right? That where it makes sense to make a connection or draw a comparison. This is what they're doing here, right? They're bringing in information from a source, even in their conclusion, because it is now important and relevant to do so in light of everything they've discussed up to this point. So it's okay to do that, to continue putting it into conversation. Though the players drafted higher performed better than those in the later part of the draft, teams that traded up for higher picks did not receive the expected value back. Unjustifiably, the top 1% of players drafted are valued twice as much as those in the 94th percentile, though the market efficiency of picks peaks in the second round. Furthermore, the first pick in the draft actually has the least amount of value in the first round when you combine the value they provide from their performance with the amount owed to them in compensation. Therefore, it is the loser's curse to have the first pick in the draft, as it will only consistently provide more than its expected value if it is traded away for more picks. The decision of the Cardinals to select a quarterback in the first round in back-to-back years for the first time in NFL history demonstrates that through correlations and successful roster management have been found, no common strategy has been adopted around the NFL. Okay. So though correlations and successful roster management have been found, what they're saying here is that the ultimate implications of all their analysis, right, is that there are some correlations in terms of roster management. What successful teams do there seems to be a correlation there in terms of habits and results, right? But no common strategy they mentioned has been adopted around the NFL. And that's where they leave us with a pretty straightforward answer. And one of the best ways you can think about sort of dismounting, if you will, like, sticking the landing as a gymnast would in this particular paper, is to really ultimately end with maybe your best and most direct answer or implication for the research that you've done. I hope it was helpful to you guys. I wish you all the best, and let me know if you're having trouble signing up. Some of you have messaged me about video feedback. I had some issues with uploading some of the video feedback for your PODs. So I'll be trying to make sure that everybody has that. If you haven't seen it yet, make sure that you go to your graded POD on Canvas. If you go to your submission there, you should see some video feedback from me. Let me know if that's not the case. I'll be working with those as quick as I can. And of course, we can talk about it during your conference as well, if that's helpful to you as you're finishing revising. Guys, all the best, and I will see you very soon.